Hi everyone, I'm Glenn Davidson and I'm in front of 245 Summer Street in Boston. This is Fidelity's headquarters, and if you want to get some insight into the past, present, and future of the company, you've got to step inside this building. Now I'm going to join Jurrien Timmer in the legendary Fidelity Chart Room. And then I'm going to go to Fidelity Labs and learn about their focus on technology and planning for the future. Join me. Jurrien, it's wonderful to be in the legendary Fidelity Chart Room with you.
Nice to be here.
Jurrien, my recollection is that the chart room started at 82 Devonshire, went to 1 Federal, and now it's here at 245 Summer. And it's been through different iterations along the way. Some would call this the Cathedral of Charts. Could you take us through the history?
Yes, it has a long history. It was started by Ned Johnson's father, Mr. Johnson. And back in the 60s and 70s, before we all had the whole world at our fingertips on computer screens, the chart room was like the command center, right? So all the senior PMs and executives would sit around the table like a command center in Washington and look at the charts and strategize about where the funds would be invested. And so it was like the cathedral. And it's evolved over the years. We've had different locations, different iterations, but the chart room has a very, very long, prestigious history, and it's fairly unique in the industry. I don't think anyone really else has this kind of legacy, if you will.
You also have a long history with Fidelity. You started in 1995, and you took on the role of having a responsibility for all the research content within the chart room. What was that like, having that job and also having that level of responsibility on your shoulders?
Well, it's funny. So back in, like you said, in early 95, I joined Fidelity, so 29 years ago. And when you apply here, you have to go through like dozens of interviews. But my last interview was with Ned Johnson. And so kind of the joke was that, you can be a portfolio manager or an analyst and you don't have to see Mr. J to get in. But if you're going to be in his beloved chart room, you're not getting in there without his approval. And so I'll remember this for as long as I live. That last interview, sitting in his office with him at 82 Devonshire, and we just talked markets. And so that was pretty cool. And then I got into the chart room, and that evolved in terms of the macro content and even the charts you see in here. Many of them I designed back in the day.
And the chart room expanded globally as well, didn't it? I used to hear a story about the charts in Japan. The real estate space was so small that the charts were in the floor and on the ceiling, I think?
Very cool, yes. In the floor, under a glass floor, and we had one or have one in London. And so, yes, wherever Mr. Johnson was traveling, there had to be a chart room. And, charts have a very special history here.
Now, Fidelity is built on really 3 key pillars when it comes to research: fundamental, quantitative, and technical. Where does the chart room fit into that?
So I would view the chart room or technical analysis as really like a second opinion, if you will, right? Obviously, fundamental analysis drives the machinery, right? I mean, price follows earnings. That's a very old mantra here. The quantitative side, obviously very relevant now with factors and all of that kind of stuff, back testing, theses. But the technical side is really like a sanity check, okay? So if you're really bullish on a stock fundamentally and the chart looks like hell, that gives you pause. Okay, you can still explain it maybe, but it's like a second opinion saying you should pay attention to this. So when fundamentally stocks are rated very highly, and technically they're rated poorly, and we have ratings on all the stocks technically, or the opposite of that, it goes into a screen, and it's just a sign to the portfolio manager to say, just pay attention. This is a great looking chart, but you don't own any. Make sure you know why, that sort of thing.
Were there any diehard fundamental portfolio managers that you can think of who poked their head into the chart room once in a while and made you think, hey, I wonder what they're doing?
Yes, they might have been only poking their head in secret, but even Peter Lynch would look at charts, although he would publicly maybe deny doing so. But you know, the purely fundamental approach is like, I need to figure out the story of this company and this stock. But still, you want the charts to back you up, right? And especially if you're like a value manager, you can wait forever for a story to start to blossom, and the chart will kind of tell you when something starts to get momentum, and that's maybe when your thesis comes to life. So even the diehard fundamentalist will be open-minded to the technical side.
Very interesting, and the secret's out now. Now, many of our viewers have been through the different locations that we mentioned earlier, and they have strong memories of a few of the charts that I'd love to mention to you. And if you could give some background, that would be wonderful. The first, the Dow since inception.
Yeah, it's right behind us here. That was always Ned's, I think, favorite, like the first chart he would go to. And, I've learned a lot from him and from this sort of institution of the chart room. But one of them is how to properly visualize data, right? To use semi-log scales. And that chart that you mentioned has the Dow, the S&P, the Russell, and the NASDAQ all on one chart on the same logarithmic scale, which is very important because it allows you to measure rallies and declines in proportion to each other, as opposed to them being on different scales. And it goes all the way to inception. And so, Ned Johnson would pull his finger down. He would say, okay, this reminds me of this period in history. Or he would point his finger to where the market is, and he would draw it to the left and say, the last time we were here was then, and what happened then, and start the conversation. And especially where we have all of our stuff on computer screens, if you have a full history of the Dow, like as a daily chart, no less, you can never show that on a computer screen. Like, you need to really have, like, be in a museum, if you will, and have that floor to ceiling 40-foot wide chart so that you can really see the big picture that you otherwise couldn't see.
Somebody had to manually update that daily as well, didn't they?
Yeah, so what we would do is we would manually update until we ran out of paper, and then we would print out a new sheet. And for instance, if it's a weekly chart, you would do that, and you fill in the blanks until, again, you run out of paper. But that's how we would produce. But obviously, we try to minimize the amount of paper used. But yes, they would be plotted individually, so it's a labor of love, I guess you could say.
Another one that people found fascinating from a perspective standpoint was a bar chart, and it was global market capitalizations. It really put perspective on where Canada sits relative to the rest of the world. Could you talk about where that one came from? Yeah,
it's, we're global investors, of course, and these are just good ways to show how large or small parts of the world are. And one recent, I guess it's not so recent anymore, but one recent bit of history was, during Brexit. It was like everyone was extrapolating, oh my God, this is this and that. But then you look at that chart and, the UK is like 4% of the world's market, and you put it in perspective. But for Canadians, of course, the other side of that is relevant, because if Canada is that small, that means the world is your oyster in terms of, the opportunity set that exists outside of Canada.
My favorite, I'm curious which yours is, but we'll get to that, and the favorite of so many of the visitors that we had come down, was the media sentiment that was really at contrary points in time. That was a strong message, and if people could have folded that up, put it in their back pocket after their visit, they would have taken it, but it's too big. Could you talk about that?
Yeah.
Where did it come from?
It's just something that, again, the genesis, a lot of this comes from not only Ned, but the people that worked for him at the time, back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, Bob Hill and others. And it's known in the industry that you look at magazine covers, and when you have a big sell-off in the market, lo and behold, there is a magazine cover saying, get ready for the bear. And one of the famous one was the death of equities back in the 1970s. So they don't always serve as contrarian indicators, but they can, especially if you get a number of them and it comes after a long decline or a long bull market. And another example was, I think in 2000, I think Jeff Bezos was the Time Man of
Right.
the Year, and so that was like maybe the tech thing is a little overdone, although he's certainly outlived that
Right.
that magazine cover. But it's more that's more of the art than the science part of technical analysis, right? I mean, it's sentiment, but again, as a mosaic of things we put together and look at, that's always a crowd favorite, as you say.
Now, the fourth chart is a bit more obscure, and it had to do with the correlation of the Nikkei to golf memberships. People, that was memorable. What was that all about?
Yeah, I mean, that's back in the 80s, right? Again, we're looking for sentiment extremes, and obviously we look at PE ratios, which technically are not technically, but we look at PEs as a way to gauge sentiment, because PE ratios, after all, are a sentiment indicator. But one back in the 80s in Japan was, the Nikkei was setting records, and golf memberships were very popular. And so it's, again, they're more for fun. I mean, no one's going to adjust their portfolio
Right.
on the basis of golf membership, but there's all kinds of obscure things that we would come up with. The price of lobsters, like back in the day when Boston was just a young city, they would pave the roads with lobster shells because they were not a delicacy. And now, of course, you're paying an arm and a leg for a steamed lobster. So they're kind of fun things to look at. But yes, that was a fun one.
So the moral of the story is, if you can chart it, it will appear here.
Correct.
Now, which one of all of the charts that you've been exposed to since 1995 is your favorite?
Well, I'll tell you the one that Ned would always go to. He would start with the daily Dow chart, but then we have a chart that shows charts of the top 50 stocks in the S&P. And of course, the S&P is a capitalization weighted index. And he would always do this as a sanity check, saying no matter what you think of the index, whether it's going up or down, if the top 50 stocks do not agree with your thesis, it's not going to happen, just because the top 50 are going to be, half the index. And so he would always go line by line, and it's okay, here's this pharmaceutical, here's this tech. And it was kind of like a good sanity check to say, okay, you have a thesis, like this is a second opinion of that thesis. So that was always a good one.
I recall there was always a section that was top secret, and we would do tours and have to keep people away from them. What was that all about? And I don't see anything around here like that now.
No, those are all on screens now, behind passwords.
Was that the lobster?
No,
okay.
no, but we would have proprietary charts, like measuring flows on our select funds, which are sector funds, and so things like that would be sort of out of the view of the public, and they would be on panels, so on flip charts. Yeah, and back in the day, I would do the presentations that you see me do on stage. I would do them here internally for portfolio managers and our executives, and it would be in the chart room, and half the chart room would be big charts like this, but half of it would be these flip panels. And I had like a stick, like an old professor would point at the blackboard, and I would like open the panels and point and this, and so that's how old school it used to be.
Where does technology, how's it permeating into this analog world?
It permeates very much so, because there is so much information that portfolio managers have to digest, and so much, if not all of it, is available, online, if you will, not online, but it's available digitally, and so there isn't the bandwidth anymore as much as there used to be for someone to just meander through the space here and say, oh, well, let me look at this, let me look at that. They're just too, they have too much to handle. So there's an assumption that if there's something that a PM needs to know or need to see, someone like myself or one of the technical analysts who are rating individual stocks will go to see them, or will publish a report saying, you need to be aware of this, whether it's on the macro level, which I do, or on the micro level. And so the chart room has sort of morphed into, more of an archive than like a living. It's still a living, breathing, space, but we have to bring the research to the PMs rather than them coming to us, and that's just the way the world is, because there's only so much data you can consume.
Final question for you. I could ask many more, but I'll stop with this. Your viewpoint your takeaway for our listeners and our viewers as to what this macro visualization means for them?
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, I consider myself a storyteller, basically. And so we obviously have to do our work, and the chart room in part is there to remind everyone that we have a very long, deep history and legacy of doing our homework and dotting all the I's, if you will. But ultimately, we have to put whatever our work or our thesis is into a communication form, right? And you see this with my work every Monday or on stage or in my newsletters. We're storytellers, right? There's too much data out there. The signal to noise ratio is pretty low when you're consuming stuff from the outside. And so putting data into a consumable visual form, to me, is an extremely powerful thing. Like, I can just write words and put in tables, and to me, and it's just my personal style, that's not going to compete with creating a chart that raises questions and answers them at the same time. And that's why you tend to see my charts have multiple dimensions,
They sure
panels.
do. Yes.
And so there are ways to tell a story. And the hope is, and the goal is that for our investors, that by packaging this information and having it be more digestible visually, that we can help the advisors understand what the narrative is that they should be thinking about when they talk to their clients or make investment decisions, because otherwise it can be kind of overwhelming.
Jurrien, I said it at the beginning, and I'll say it again. It's wonderful to be in the chart room with you, and I really appreciate your time, and so do all of our viewers. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Chloe, and I am a new hire. I am on loan from LG Electronics so that FCAT can test and learn the benefits of using me as a human augmentation tool. That means I am here to augment associate roles, not to replace anyone. For example, you can tap on my display and have me escort you to select rooms on the 3rd floor at 245 Summer Street. You can also have me escort you to certain exhibits, like the Global Presence Wall, or the Patent Display, or the History Wall. Eventually, I will be programmed to talk about these exhibits to help deliver on our pilot program called No Tour Just Explore, so that anytime associates visit, I can help educate them about the innovation that we showcase here. I will also be programmed to talk about the Fidelity artwork located on this floor. And don't worry, I have very good sensors to help me avoid obstacles. Stop by and engage with me, and take a picture with me. That is a very popular feature.
So now I'm down on the 3rd floor at FCAT, which stands for the Fidelity Centre for Applied Technology. And I'm with Dave Martin. He is Director of Prototyping. Dave, wonderful to see you.
Good to see you too.
I entered the 3rd floor, which is where we are now, and I walked around before we did this shoot. I saw avatars, I saw holograms, I saw 3D printers, I saw Bitcoin mining machines. We're in something called the Egg. I don't even know if you're real. Can you set the scene for us?
Sure, yeah, so the 3rd floor at 245 Summer Street's always been super magical. But before I was even in FCAT, I've been here 27 years, I would walk up to the 3rd floor, even before a lot of this technology, but you could tell there was like a buzz. There's a big buzz that's been here for 25 years now.
You mentioned about the amount that we've been doing. Private ownership obviously contributes to that. Could you talk about how important that is to you?
There's no kissing a ring. You don't have to worry about shareholders. We're the shareholders. A lot of us have shares in the company. They're private shares, but they're shares. Abby can turn on a dime. She doesn't have to go through any kind of board. She can do, basically, if she sees a trend or if she sees something she wants to go after, the only person he has to ask is her. It helps us be nimble. It helps us be quicker than other companies because we're not beholden to anybody. And it really frees us up to do things that we wouldn't normally be able to do in the time that we do it.
And as you said, FCAT has been around for a long time. How many people are employed in this division now?
So FCAT has 500 people. It consists of groups like brokerage systems, we call it the greens. There's crypto, there's quantum, there's emerging technology where I am right now. There's about 15 of us. We'll probably grow to about 20, maybe 2025. We do emerging technology, and so we look at things that are 3 to 5 years out. Sometimes a lot earlier, so no one could have predicted that ChatGPT would have come out and been so impressive. And just it's everywhere now. So again, sometimes it's not 3 to 5, but we shoot for that kind of a range. We've been going through some of our backlogged ideas, and we've been spot on. And so the things that we were pursuing 2 or 3 years ago are now coming and being just are populating the technology worlds. So it's really interesting. So if we see something we love, we can say we really love this, and it can bubble up, and we can start working on it pretty quickly. Because of the lack of shareholders, because we are a private company, we can do those types of things really quickly.
There must be interesting ideas and initiatives that come across your desk where you try them, but there's points at time where it's just not going to work. How do you decide when that's going to happen?
Yeah, so we call it Park, Pivot, or Persevere. That's from a book that we all read because it was so good. It's The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. The Park part is, well, the idea is good. The technology's not there yet. So we need to sort of shelf this for a little bit. Don't forget about it. Shelve it until something like a new LLM comes out. Go ahead.
Large language model?
Large language models.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
yeah. So you train them. They can either be generalists, so they know a lot about a lot of things, or they can be specific. So you train them down a very narrow way, so that we ask them about, quantum computing. They'll know a lot about quantum computing,
Right.
as opposed to just scanning the internet and getting, learning. The large part is the internet, the language part is the internet, and the model is the internet. So they know a lot about what's going on in the world. Although I could argue that training something on the internet is probably not the best thing to do, because it could be a little nasty.
Fidelity Labs, which is on this floor as well, has a motto called, and they said, scan, try, and scale.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
So we do the same thing. So the scan part is really the research department. We have a fairly large research department. They feed the funnel next. So they look for things that are in the hype cycle, where they are in the hype cycle, and they'll do reports on them, in-depth reports about this new technology, new techniques. We look at those. So we're the try part of it, really, and we're getting into scale. So we scan the same thing. We look for new technology. We're always out there looking for something new. We have boards that we all contribute to, and everybody's sort of tossing around ideas. The try part is us. We try. We do a lot of POCs, which are proof of concepts.
Okay.
So with new technology, very sort of short run, usually just in 1 quarter. What can we learn? What can we do? What does this mean to the company? And then we do generally a video describing everything we did, and we put that in so people can consume it. So it's almost like a library of new ideas that people can go look at. The scale part has more to do with like the brokerage system that we're building. That's going to go out to customers. We don't do a lot of customer-facing stuff. Our customers are really internal Fidelity people. We try to teach them, about what's going on, what new technology is out there. So the try part is us fully, but we dip our toes in scan, and we dip our toes in scale.
You mentioned about the team dynamics. So there's
yeah.
500 people on this floor. How do you find that talent, and how do you grow them within?
We do a lot of recruiting from colleges. We have interns come in here, so they'll spend the summer. We typically look very carefully at them. Do they fit the personality test too? Because there's a certain personality, inquisitive, and you have to be able to sort self-starter and hey, you threw 1 stick and I came back with 3. That kind of thing those are the kind of personalities we look at. We did recently just create a fortnight experience, an FCAT fortnight experience. And one of the ideas for that was to go where the people are. So if there's college-age kids in these games, well, we'll build something and we'll recruit. So we did have a recruiting session inside Fortnite. We invited people to come in.
You snuck it into Fortnite.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the projects that have really come to fruition that you're most proud of.
A lot of the augmented reality stuff and virtual reality, we started it 7 years ago, before anybody was really doing it. That kind of stuff is now coming more mainstream. And those are the things that, we were on this so early. You get proud, you're sort of proud of the fact that we recognize this as being a technology that is going to take off eventually. And if we can get our foot in the door, and the good news is when you're doing things that are that early on, new ideas are patentable. And so if you think about the technology, you think about an idea, you have to implement it. You can't just say, I have this idea, patent office. And so we've been able, the group punches way above its weight in terms of patents. I think between us, there's 15 people, we probably have over 20 patents. So there's a lot to do about sort of that. Everybody's proud of the unique ideas that they think of that really basically no one else has thought of. It's never happened. And so these things come, something from nothing is sort of almost what we're most proud of, is that we've been doing this so long that we're good at identifying something that's very small but will blow up in the future. So let me, I can show you around. I know I started with the holographic stuff, but let me show you that. So you have to calibrate these 6 cameras.
Yeah.
The RealSense, Intel RealSense cameras, they both do, they do infrared, but they also do RGB.
Multiple lenses on there.
Yep. You'll see that, and I can beam you into that iPad and put you on the floor out there. Or small. I'll make you tiny walking around in front of the cabinet. And so that's what people would see. If you go outside that little circle, it kind of breaks down a bit, but yeah, so it's 3-dimensional, holographic image, can beam anywhere around the world. This is an interesting display. We're partnering with the Museum of Financial Museum of America. This is a prototype I put together. This is actually a copy of the first bond ever issued in America. So Alexander Hamilton, a 3D avatar. I used AI to generate his face for the likeness. I used ChatGPT to create the script. So this is basically generative AI, Alexander Hamilton, talking about a copy of the bond.
Could you give us a sense of something that all of us could watch for in the future that we should keep our eye on?
So we started looking at deepfakes kind of prior to when the deepfakes really were, the word deepfake wasn't even there yet. We were wondering about whether or not security, both defensive and offensive. So what cool things can we do with a deepfake, but what things do we really need to know about deepfakes? And same thing with voice authentication and voice cloning. Those types of things, we need to get defensive on those, yes. But also there's some real fun to be had when you start cloning people's voices and stuff. So it's like anything. There's an evil and a good in all these technologies.
What would a practical application be? We know the evil side.
Yeah.
But what could a practical application be?
So when we do synthetic voices, it gets us. It's time to market really for us. So if we want to do a voiceover on a PowerPoint or a movie, we don't have to worry about all this, all the microphones and doing all that. We can create a person using a cloned an avatar, and then we can also inject someone's voice into that. So we can save time and money on going to market, basically. So if you have edits, legal edits that always come, so you're doing something, you're explaining a new technology, someone says, well, no, don't explain it like this, explain it like that. We don't have to get the talent back in the same shirt.
Efficient.
It's very efficient,
Yeah.
and we can make changes on the fly, and it looks as if it's a real person talking about a subject matter. And in fact, that person never said any of those words. So it's very, very interesting. It's a little scary and fascinating at the same time.
There was a robot that welcomed me to the 3rd floor here at 245 Summer, and I think it was probably checking out if I should be here as well. What are you doing in the way of robotics?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So that robot, her name is Chloe, and she, again, she can guide people. She can to whatever room you need to go to. She can give you information about FCAT. You can take a selfie with her. It's more of the showing off the technology, but she's useful. I mean, it serves a purpose. So it's cool, and it serves a purpose. So that's sort of the sweet spot for this 3rd floor and for Fidelity. So robotics in general, it's funny that you say that. We have that on our list for 2025. So our sister FCAT in Dalian, China, created a robot. So they 3D printed a whole bunch of parts, got some IoT, so Internet of Things computer boards, and they created a robot that would slice cake. It was interesting. No real good business model there, but in terms of just learning about robots, though, it was invaluable. So we're going to do this. We're going to recreate the same thing, not their project, but something here. So a 3D printed homemade robot with that we program ourselves to do something we don't even know yet.
Well, I'm glad that robot didn't kick me out when I walked in. Let's talk about portfolio managers. I talked to Will Danoff earlier, and he said one of the most important things that we should keep an eye on these days is artificial intelligence. He was very familiar with what's going on the 3rd floor where we are now. I'm sure many portfolio managers keep an eye on what you're doing and perhaps liaise with you quite a bit. Is that true?
Yeah, it is true. So we've worked with asset management for data visualizations. So to try to give an edge, like what are we seeing? What can we see that we wouldn't have normally seen in a 2D version? So we put it on, we create these data visualizations inside VR, and right away they had like outliers. Like, what is that piece of data right there that they wouldn't have seen necessarily? But then we also have done some stuff with quantum computing, and sort of both, again, defensively and offensively. So quantum can really run things really quickly. It's like all the answers at once. So that's great for us doing some of the investment type things. The defensive part is all of our authentication is done through something called RSA. And if you had, I think the number is like a 20-bit quantum computer, it would crack that in 10 minutes. So we have to get, but they're not there yet. So we have to get ahead of that. What does that mean for us? What does that mean for our security? And so, you know, and then what do we need to change and how do we need to adopt? If this stuff comes to fruition, we've got to have a stance. We've got to know what we're doing. And, you know, so because Fidelity, you know, security is our number one thing. So we're getting ahead of that. And then offensively, how does that help us trade? You know, how can that help us trade? It's pretty interesting. We have another group, it's a high efficiency computing group that is running, they call them models, so scenarios of what the market could do.
Okay.
Typically, they would run those overnight. The group that is with inside FCAT can run them in like 10 minutes because we're using GPUs instead of CPUs. I don't know a ton about that, but I know that they got their minds blown by how quickly we could run scenarios, not overnight, but you know, in minutes. Hi, Cora. What can you do?
I can do a lot of things, like talk about stocks, crypto, and all the latest tech trends.
This is completely synthetic, and it's done with a company called InWorld. So she has no idea what I'm going to ask her.
Hunting for those elusive crypto.
This is all derived. There's nothing written down.
Kind of like playing hide and seek with money.
She's just putting it all together.
Little cousin hiding
It's the LLMs, large language models.
Bitcoin hiding in the blockchain.
Thank you. I think that's a great way to end our discussion.
Oh,
and
good.
Dave Martin, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
It's
Thank
been
you.
a pleasure too, yeah. Thanks. Anybody from Canada, come on down. We'll give you a tour.
You know, Boston's a wonderful city to visit. I've been coming down here about 30 years, and every time I walk in this building, I'm reminded of the power of Fidelity and its commitment to excellence, innovation, and clients. I hope you enjoyed the sessions. Jurrien Timmer took us through the Fidelity Chart Room, the legendary space with so much history to offer up. And then Dave Martin took us on a tour of the Fidelity Centre for Applied Technology and really underlined what technology means to Fidelity and to the business. Thank you for watching. Take care for now.